Although LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars is obviously labeled as the third LEGO Star Wars game released, the events of the Clone Wars are set in between Episode 2 Attack of the Clones and Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Both films are covered in the very first LEGO Star Wars game, dating back to the 6th generation of consoles. One of the things worth noting is that due to the time the game was developed, it mostly covers the first 2 seasons of the CGI show and certain events from Attack of the Clones and the pilot film to said series. Just don't expect references to the earlier Clone Wars series by Samurai Jack creator Genndy Tartakovsky, because none of that is covered here. The other thing worth noting is that the main storyline isn't covered in the way the previous 2 LEGO Star Wars games are covered, in that you have the option to follow film by film. Instead, you have the option to follow the story villain by villain. What I mean by that is that the episodes of the show have been jumbled up and organized for evil characters in the show, who are Count Dooku, General Grievous, and Asajj Ventress, which seem to be the best way of organizing the storylines, but watchers of the show may be a little bit confused due to this little jumble. On to the gameplay. While you get the levels you expect out of a LEGO game in that you go from screen to screen, fighting some enemies, solving a few puzzles, and collecting as many studs and other collectibles as you can, LEGO Star Wars 3 introduces levels that have more open battlefields to match up with the bigger battles in that time frame. These open battlefield levels have an attempt at being more quote-unquote strategic, in that you use resources, mainly studs, to build stations that either spawn more foot soldiers that wield blasters or rocket launchers, or they can call upon certain mech or tank units. The foot soldiers carrying certain weapons, such as rapid fire or explosives, can be used to destroy certain buildings respectively, coated with either more gold or silver coating when you have another certain character that can command these forces by the press of the Z button on the nunchuck. There is even an extra gameplay mode where you can select between either the Republic or the CIS, and, depending on the vehicles you unlock, whether it has a blaster with more explosive force or has a kind of laser stream that can drill buildings to the ground. Unfortunately, these levels outside of the extra gameplay modes aren't as challenging as they'd like to be. I understand it's a LEGO game where if you die, you instantly respawn, losing your studs in the process, but your enemies in these battlefield stages don't even try to step it up in hindering your progress. Sure, they'll shoot you when your army's on sight, but for the most part, they run around like idiots and avoid any chance of attacking your buildings. The most challenging you get from them is if you play the campaign, is if there's a time limit, which I've managed to mess up a few times. At the very least, they are a good source of a little extra money in vehicular combat, especially with the tanks, feel quite good complemented with the motion controls for the aiming mixed with the lock-on system, even with the very slow walker mechs. Of course, being a Traveler's Tales LEGO game, local multiplayer is included, which include the standard co-op and more competitive modes where players must race against time to complete the main objective. And the first one who does obviously wins. Again, this is the closest thing to an otherwise mediocre RTS-like segments get any fun out of them. Another mode returning from LEGO Star Wars 2 is Bounty Hunter mode, where both players have a limited time to look for the target character, having to go through hordes of soldiers and droids to do it, which again, to me, adds value to the game. Control-wise, the game is your basic LEGO fare in that they are simple, but they work. And being that this is the Wii version, expect some motion controls, which for the most part are only used for having a cursor when you need to hold down a button and aim. But again, simple, but it works. Pair that with it still having some of the charming humor that the LEGO series carried over, and before the series started to add voice clips from either the original source material plus original voice acting for some games, and you have your standard but still fun LEGO fare, marred down by a mediocre strategy-like mode for some levels. Overall, LEGO Star Wars 3 gets a 7 out of 10.